Set your waist, set your waist, set your waist. Looking on the city light.
Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Hopefully everyone had a fun weekend. We just got a lot of house stuff done, really.
Yeah, me, actually. I'm just kidding. Danille's not feeling very good today.
I did the whole kitchen yesterday.
That's true.
So do we want to just jump straight into the Twitter questions? We're going to be discussing the HOA today and just some interesting stories we've had with the HOA. And
so I know all you guys have had HOA stories. So, we've had our few too. And I think it's funny that every time I start talking a little bit about it, everybody has another one. So everybody has HOA stories, HOA nightmares. So I thought it would just be fun to see kind of where it went. So hopefully you guys have some stories that we can talk about because, some HOAs do cross the line. Some don't. Some are good. Some are emotional. So
yeah, and we're going to give you some tips too when dealing with the HOAs.
Yeah.
Before we jump into that, though, Steve, do you want to pull the Twitter question of the week? So you asked, what's something that would instantly make you not want to buy or invest in a property? And Ibrahim said, ridiculous rates and poor development around properties.
Yeah, for me, it's location. So, I think I've told the story before where the mayor of Phoenix had designated a certain number of properties that were, not very well managed, and not poor ownership, poor management. So I went down and looked at them, and I came back to it, and I'm like, hey, there's no way that I could fix this neighborhood. So it was a neighborhood issue. Well, the property was actually, in the middle of it all. So I was like, so for me, the neighborhood is a big red flag. You want to be the ugly duckling in a great neighborhood, not the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jerry, get to the second response to your question, Ken. Nick said, we backed out of an offer once because the seller was convinced of perjury fraud involving other investors in our market. Case was all over the local paper. I try to avoid litigious people, especially if you're in tight-knit communities.
Yeah, he was convicted. So, yeah, that's a big deal too. Does the tiger or is it leopard changes spots or tiger changes stripes?
I think tiger and stripes.
Tiger. Okay. Well, I don't know. The question is who do you want to be in business with? That's another good one. We actually walked from a deal once. I walked from an attorney, a Chicago attorney. We had cut a deal and everything, but you could just tell that from the negotiation. So we walked.
Mm-hmm. That he wasn't happy with it.
Oh, he was so pissed that we walked. But
okay.
Whatever.
Steve, pull up Twitter question 3. Constant is saying toxic leakage over the course of 50 years in the ground soil, and I don't have any brownfield experience.
Yeah, I've had this too. So we had a property in Oregon that was on it was a old railroad. They used to fix railroad cars, and it was along the river. And they had built a commercial property and apartments and everything there. And excuse me, and there was all this sludge and stuff, from all those years, right along the Willamette River in Oregon. And we did our phase 1, which is, your basic environmental. And it quickly went to phase 2 and 3, and we had to do groundwater testing and radon and all this stuff. We found everything on that property. That was a environmental nightmare. We ended up buying it though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my first condo that I was going to buy was actually on a Superfund site in Scottsdale, and kind of same. It means that something toxic was there at one
Motorola, yeah.
point.
Motorola had Motorola was based in Phoenix for a long time. I don't know are they even still around? But I think it's General Dynamics now actually. But they had a big spill or leakage, I guess, and it went through all the properties. It's called the Superfund.
Yeah, so I kind of backed out from that just because I wasn't sure what that meant, and I didn't know if I wanted to deal with it.
It could be an additional layer of insurance, and there's some other things. It could be like you walked away from the deal, so
Yeah.
you just never know. Those little things can be big things.
A little harder to sell. There's a few things today. You have your happy hour coming up on Thursday. This is open to the general public. We do apologize. It was supposed to be last.
Yeah, if you guys, first of all, last Thursday, so here's what happened. We crashed the server. So we used a company called Webinar Jam, and they crashed the server. Jerry right afterwards said, hey, remember that last time we had a problem with them too? So be careful with that company. And there was 3,000 people registered, and I don't know what happened, but man, were they mad. So if you signed up, you do not have to re-sign up. So... but I know there's even more now. So this is quite a topic, this one here. So I'm excited about that. That's this Thursday. Don't miss it.
Yes, at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So that would be 7 Eastern.
And it's free.
And Jerry, they don't have to re-sign up?
No. That's
okay.
what Tarl told me today. I guess I asked him. It's definitely free. Also, we have virtual tickets for sale. A lot of people have been asking about that.
For this?
For Limitless itself.
Oh, okay. For Limitless,
Yeah.
yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, because you have Limitless on the 15th through the 17th.
Of June.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, and Bill says you can't be too pissed if it's free. That's true about your webinar not going
There were
through.
some funny comments, though. I was like, oh, my God.
Well, people plan their day around
There's
it,
some
so I get
creative
it.
stuff going on. Yeah, we had Kiyosaki and Gammon. And so anyway, that'll happen again.
Yep, this Thursday at 4 Arizona time. All right, so let's hop into this today. So we definitely want a little bit of audience participation here for just some funny HOA stories or some serious ones too. But we want to kind of dive into the HOA. And I think people that live in communities without HOAs are a little bit naive to the fact of HOA issues.
Well, first of all, HOAs are a big deal. So let's paint the positive picture first. Homeowners Association, that's HOA. And essentially, you all pay in collectively, equally, based on the operating expenses of that particular association. So there is a purpose. What happens is sometimes some HOAs can go over the line on rules and regulations and things like that. And so that's typically, we hear a lot of issues around landscaping and parking and guests and, those kinds of things. We got one already. This was an interesting one. There was you guys love this one. There was a policy that they put that you had to dress up. There's a garage sale dress code. That was an HOA policy, a garage sale dress code. And anyone who attended had to wear polos and khakis. So obviously that's an interesting one. But there's a whole bunch of HOA things that do happen. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to start, let's just start with things to remember when dealing with the HOA, because a lot of them can be crazy. I deal with 4, currently myself. And they're all from time to time crazy. And then you get a new board and that board's not crazy. And then they elect new people and those people are crazy. So it just I go through ebbs and flows with which HOA is causing me the most problems.
And I find, by the way, don't forget that these are volunteer positions with your neighbors. I think that's important to realize.
Yeah.
So these are your neighbors. Like I remember that one neighbor. Remember you had like an orange tree and a beautiful tree.
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't
but
say anything.
Basically, I had a neighbor that was tattling. It's usually a neighbor that's tattling on you, whether they're part of the HOA or not.
Yeah.
It depends on your tenants. Like I have tenants that, it's almost like when you get on the HOA's radar about something, then they become really crazy about that one thing, which can be problematic when you have a tenant just because.
Well, I also know there's a lot of rules and regulations flying around actually being able to rent your house or Airbnb your house. So I know one of the recommendations if you are going to Airbnb is to try to get into a non-HOA. So HOAs, they can affect where people look and buy. Because right now you're looking for houses in a non-HOA.
Yeah, Robert on YouTube said he's not a big fan of HOAs in general. But yeah, I mean, it can become problematic. So let's start with the things to remember, though. So to start, they have to follow their CC&Rs, and I think that's important because sometimes they step out of bounds on their CC&Rs.
Yeah, that stands for covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And so each HOA has a set of bylaws and a set of CC&Rs.
Yeah, and so they have to follow those. So you would think that every time you get a notice, they are following their CC&Rs, but that's not really the case because these are volunteer positions. They're not always run super tight and professionally, and so I think that
there's a lot of interpretation and there's a lot of emotion. So people, like if they're on the board, they sometimes and they don't like something. The size of a pet, which is, by the way, one of the big HOA issues, then they can decide, well, we don't want pets over 15 pounds, which, by the way, is one of the HOA policies that I found online, too. So imagine if you had a dog or you've been living there a while and, it's a 30, 40-pound dog, and all of a sudden they pass that. So then now you're in a fight with them. So these are the kinds of things that HOAs do.
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, the orange tree that I had, so I had a neighbor that was just constantly turning me in because my oranges were falling off my orange tree. And the first time, and I actually lived there at the time, I wasn't renting it. And the first time was reasonable because I wasn't picking up the oranges. So I probably had a zillion oranges on the ground. And what I didn't know is they attracted roof rats, which I actually had. So that was my own fault for having the oranges on the ground. So no big deal. Got a notice, started picking up the oranges. Picked them up every few days. There would be like one orange that would fall a day. So every 3 or 4 days, I'd pick up 3 or 4 oranges. So then I got another notice saying, you can't have any oranges. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. So I start picking them up every single day. So then even to the point of we went to Florida one time and I actually had to ask my neighbor if she could come over every day and pick up my oranges so that I wouldn't get an HOA fine. Well, still... that all goes through and I still get fined even though I'm picking them up every day because basically if she came by and an orange had fallen when I was at work, I was going to get a fine. So then I had to start picking them up in the morning and in the evening. And I was still getting a fine because if it would fall in the middle of the day and she'd happen to walk by, the lady that was inspecting, or what I found out, my crazy neighbor that was turning me in, I get a fine. So I had to write them an email and push back. And this is the first time I had ever pushed back on an HOA and basically say, this isn't fair. You know what I mean? And they're like, no, these are the rules, everything else. Well, Ken had me look at my CC&Rs and there was no mention of fruit anywhere in my CC&Rs, meaning they can't govern the fruit because they don't have it in their bylaws. So they basically had to write a letter go out to the whole entire neighborhood stating that it's basically stating that they can't control fruit, but they highly would like it if we would pick it up and everything else. But what it did is it got me all my fines back and it got them off my back on this one issue.
But those kinds of things can come up everywhere, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
It does, the orange. What is the orange story in your neighborhood?
Yeah.
I had a buddy that had this HOA. They said that you can have no blue trampolines.
Oh wow!
It can only be black and green, and and then there was another one that the trash seems to be a big one. Don't put out your trash until midnight at night. I've heard that one.
Yeah. You kind of get dinged, if you put it out too early or too late.
Well, here's the thing. Like people put it out before they go to work, let's say.
Yeah.
And then they get home from work. Well, you can actually get fined.
Right.
Because if you're at work, your trash is sitting out front. So I don't know how fair that is either. You got to give people time to come home.
Yeah, and Camille said be careful with AirBNBs because she lives in a non-HOA, but still her city does not allow it. And Michael, Yes, it's 4 p.m. Pacific time, not 3. It was listed there on the left corner. So yes, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern for this Thursday's webinar. Running with Altitude said they like the benefit of the HOA because it maintains the value of the community.
Yep, it can, and that's what they're for. And they're right. It doesn't, in most cases, but in some cases they draw the line. You need to draw the line at the CC&Rs and everything else. Then after that, so in your case, and in my case, we had the house painted. Well, we had it repaired, and the neighbor turned us in for painting the house the same color that it was, by the way. So I was like, then they sent this big fine and this whole statement of that I kept any changes or modifications. And I'm like, well, it's the same color. And the email came back from the management company and said, well, one of the board members feels like the color was different. Like,
right.
wow. So interesting.
Yeah. Bill said that he can't put his trash cans out till 6 and the trash comes at 7. So he basically has an hour. But the second tip to dealing with your HOA is to stay factual. It's easy to get emotional. When you get emotional, you don't want to become a target. Like my one tenant became really emotional because he left the patio cluttered, and now he's on their target list. So basically, because he made such a scene about it and didn't handle it properly, now they dinged him because he had a pair of shoes out there because they said shoes aren't allowed on the patio. So now he had just one pair of shoes, and so that got him a fine. So it's not good to fight too hard. It's not good to be emotional because they're going to get emotional.
What
so
was
just
the one
remain
with
to the facts.
with the dog? The dog feces?
Yeah,
Well,
so I'm gonna get to that. So that's the third thing would be, if you need to, you can get cameras. So basically, I had my tenant had these 2 huge dogs, and there was like little dog poop everywhere, and they kept blaming my tenant, and their reasoning was we had dogs and we had a pooper scooper out front. And I'm like, well, if we have a pooper scooper out front, that probably means that we they're picking up the poop, right? So anyways, they tried to fine me, so I had to get cameras, and the cameras then alleviated the fines because I could prove that it wasn't their dogs because we had cameras all around the condo. So that's what I had to resort to in that situation. And I actually even had to take it as far as like offering to get like a DNA sample on some of the poop just because I kept getting fined. It wasn't a one-time deal, and it wasn't their dog. So I ended up having to offer to the HOA committee to get the poop DNA tested.
That's insane.
Yeah, just to make the problem go away.
That's insane.
Well, they have actually. I told the board they should do that to alleviate this issue they were having, because if everyone got their dog DNA tested and then they can submit this stuff for DNA, then they can figure out who's doing it versus just saying because it's around your premise that it must be you, So these are just some of the crazy things, that we've had to deal with. But I think something good, if you have the time, would be to, if you can get on the board, it can be helpful, because you can then have some leverage in your community.
Oh my God, shoot me.
But the other
thing,
but the other thing is you need to make sure that your tenants are aware they're responsible for the HOA fees. So I have not really had this issue where my tenants were being fined from the HOA.
This is a good point though.
Because the dog poop issue, I was really fighting for my tenants because it wasn't their dogs, and I knew because the camera it wasn't. But this other tenant with the cluttered patio and everything, he said, where in the lease does it say I have to pay my HOA fines? And I actually had to look through the lease because I had never really dealt with this. And luckily my lease did say, and he had initialed, that he's responsible for following the HOA guidelines and any fines are, his responsibility. And I think that's important. And it also said if he continued to get fines, I could evict him. So I think that that's something good you guys want to make sure is in your rental agreement, because if it's not, you're the one that's going to be paying the fines for them, because it doesn't say anywhere that, they have to pay the fines. So I think that's really important. And like I said, I didn't even have that in mind because I've not had this issue. And luckily, when I went back to look through it, I thought it was interesting. He, instead of just saying, yeah, I'll be compliant, I won't do that anymore, he said, well, this is ridiculous. And where does it say I have to pay the fines? And it's like, whoa. So it did say that. So that was a good thing.
Well, I think it's important to know, guys, too, that most HOAs don't like renters. So you really, really need to make sure that, in fact, when you remember that one renter moved in, didn't they go knock on the door?
Yeah, I had a renter move, my first renter after I moved out of that home with the orange tree. I rented it in for a year, and somebody knocked on the door and asked the girl, they had just moved in like 3 or 4 days before, how long their lease was for, because they thought I was using it for Airbnb, which is not allowed. And she said, oh, it's for a year. And he said, well, I need to see your lease. And so she showed it to him, this random guy. It's just some random guy that knocked at the door. And that said he was on the HOA board, which come to find he was not. He was an ex-member of the HOA board. But anyways, then she calls me like, I don't know if I feel safe living here because I'm getting interrogated. So then I had to call the HOA extremely upset, saying, who the hell is knocking on, the door? And like, well, that was an ex-member. And I'm like, well, if you guys have any issues with the lease, you need to come to me, not my tenants. Yeah. And so I had to really get pretty snippy at that, because she wanted not to move out, but she was saying she didn't feel safe because he came to the door and demanded to see her stuff, which I do understand. So that was kind of interesting. Dr. Masad says his HOA does assessments every year, and they seem to always to be short on money, even though the property manager drives a nice car.
I know. I remember when my kids were little, I bought one of those basketball hoops, Mm-hmm. I didn't want to put one on the house. So I got the portable one, the kind that you flip down, and they made me get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah. They
said it actually has to be affixed to the house. It can't be portable. So I was like, okay, that's kind of goofy. That was the last time I heard from the HOA, except for now.
Until recently.
10 years ago.
Yeah, Ken and I have been having a lot of HOA issues recently.
I think we've got 4 notices in like a month.
For not doing much of anything
wrong. By the way,
wrong.
We're getting them all over the place, not just where we live, but...
Yeah. Well, and I am wondering, too, if the HOAs are needing some cash, perhaps, because they have been more aggressive in, just ours and one of my other rentals. They've been more aggressive lately.
Yeah, it's possible.
So Robert said he got a $2,000 fine once for his tenants leaving tires on the side of the driveway for a bit. It's a big fine.
$2,000. Did he pay it? I wonder.
I don't know. Robert, did you pay, or did you have your tenants pay, or did you fight it?
That's a lot.
And HOA fees can be negotiable, especially if it's like the first time offense or it is something that's like totally ridiculous. I've definitely been able to reverse a lot of HOA fines, but predominantly being by being reasonable and friendly when trying to deal with it, but persistence is key. Doug said that he paid his HOA fees, and the management company said that he did not, and they put a lien against his house, so he had to go and prove from his prize bank account that he paid them. And I will say that the burden is on the homeowner to defend, with HOA. So the burden of proof does lie with you, unfortunately. You should first put it on them, but at the end of the day, you do have to do what you have to do to prove. Like, I had to show them the camera footage from the dogs and everything else. But
in my case, I was like, well, on the color, because I met with the contractor who did the repairs, and I said, just make sure it's the same color so that we don't have to go to the HOA and request a different color. So we did, and then the guy clearly didn't go back and look at what was approved before just calling the management company and have them shoot off a letter. So I thought that was kind of bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are saying, it's just important with the tenant thing. If your tenants are going to accrue fines, and they might, that you just need to make sure that you're covered. Robert said about the $2,000 in tires that he fought it for a year and lost, and I didn't have an HOA caveat in the lease, so I had to pay it. Well, you probably learned to put the HOA caveat in the lease at that. Okay, so a couple things, and make sure we're going to jump into some questions. Make sure you guys ask your questions. We should have time to answer them today, or a lot of them today. But go to kensinnercircle.com to register for premium, where you can ask questions. We answer all questions, some on here and some privately in messages. All right. So our first question comes from Hector. Hector said that he closed on an 11-unit complex that's 1 mile from the local university in New Mexico. They're like 4 one-bedrooms and 7 studios. He's thinking about turning it into an active senior complex instead of college students. What are your thoughts?
Well, a few things. One, seniors don't like stairs, so I don't know if this is all single level or not, but just keep that in mind. Two, typically my experience has been that a lot of times, depending on the age of the senior, they usually have a lot of big furniture and a lot of stuff that they've carried with them their whole life. So as an example, we have 4 or 5 projects that are seniors, and they typically have a lot of stuff that they've, been carting around for a long time. So you want to keep that in mind, especially if you have 7 studios. But from an affordability standpoint, I can see how that might be nice, and you'll have less turnover, of course. So I think that's probably what you're angling at. Students, as they enroll and leave and graduate and all those kinds of things, you do have a lot more turnover. The one thing that we have in our senior projects is stability.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things around safety and also a social aspect. So the properties that we have, they actually have engagement. So we have a social director, and we have on one of them we have a van that we actually take them shopping into the beauty shop, and beauty salon, beauty shop, those kinds of things. So there are those things, but from an affordability standpoint, those studios could be gold for you one way or another.
Yeah, and Maria said that her mom hates stairs and she's a senior, and I think that's a big one. How about would you put elevators in, or would that be too expensive?
Yeah, it's expensive, and
yeah,
it is a lot to that.
Yeah.
Plus 11 units.
Right. It probably wouldn't be worth the cost.
No.
So I guess if you have stairs, you should probably rethink it, potentially. But if you don't have stairs, it could be really good.
It's a definite possibility. You probably needs to be gated, and there's safety aspects to that.
He said it is gated.
Okay.
Gated and
good.
very quiet.
Wow, very good. So you never know.
Yep, absolutely. So Emmanuel from Inner Circle wants to know the best practices for running a property management company. Him and his wife, they're American citizens living in London, so they just want to start out.
Well, there's a whole bunch of detail in my book, The ABCs of Property Management, which you can buy. It's $20 or something. So, yeah, and I just did 3 videos on this exact topic on YouTube. So, but, think about what the property management, think about what your client would want. They want not to hear from you, and they want money. Those are the 2 goals. So that means there's a whole bunch around finding the right tenant and your systems and your accounting and all those kinds of things. Not saying you can't do it, but also there's a lot of licensing requirements in different states you got to check into. So because you're handling other people's money. So if let's say I hire you to manage my property, you're now collecting rent that's actually mine. So there are some trust account issues and some things like that, security deposit issues, and there, that you collect that have nothing to do with the rent, but have a lot to do with the damage. And so there's a fair amount to this, and just make sure that you model it, after somebody that's doing it, and you'll shortcut a lot of those issues.
Absolutely. Jason, I had to read this. He said, I bought my entire complex, so no more HOA problems for me now.
Nice.
So that's awesome.
I actually, I've had a couple people do that. Once you get the majority, you can eliminate the HOA.
Yeah, right.
That's what defund the HOA means.
So Bill is asking from YouTube, Ken, do you own any assisted living properties yourself?
Yeah, we have 4. I think we have a 5th now. Now, there's different levels. So we call ours assisted living, but there's active living and then assisted living and then I guess congregate care. Or so, what we do is we have a senior active property that offers services. So the services could be one's called Meals on Wheels. There's also services for daily and weekly checks and those kinds of things, and transportation. And so we offer that. So we're not quite at that level where we offer meals and the kind of that next level. So but a lot of places do offer that. That's a whole nother animal, by the way. Once you start getting into managing a restaurant, essentially, for your residents.
So Derek from Inner Circle is asking, what is the big mistake first-time investors make when they buy a rental?
Well, there's many. The first is location. The second is the tenant that they put in there. The third is it doesn't cash flow. There's just so many.
Yeah, I would say a big one is, those are all really good. Location's a big one because people try to get the better deal by paying less for a property, but then they have a harder time renting it out.
Yeah, you want to be where people are.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people chase the edge of the town because the price is less, and then they can't figure out why they can't get people to move out there. Right.
Absolutely. And then that affects their cash flow because if it's, empty for a month, then.
And I get it because they're cheap. I mean, if something in town's $500 and something on the edge of town's $350, I get it. I understand. And the rents are going to be different too. But the real issue is how many people want want to live out there. There's drive and there's gas and there's all that stuff to and from work, let's say. Whereas maybe the one in town has some kind of transportation, or you can walk, or it's close to work, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So Will's calling you out a bit. On YouTube, he said, before you had us at inning 3 on your podcast, but on Rich Dad, you said inning 1. What's the update on where you see us in the ball game?
Yeah, I did. He's right. I did say that. So I'm not trying to make an excuse here, but I will tell you, when I look at real estate, I look at it very differently. So I look at single family differently than I look at multifamily. Then I look at office. I look at industrial. Then I look at self-storage. I look at malls. I look at retail. I look at, those kinds of things. Okay. And they also have different cycles. So I would say office buildings right now are probably in about the 3rd inning. Multifamily is probably a little bit before that. So why do I say those two things as an example? I'm not even going down the single family road at the moment. So single family in Florida is operating very differently than single family in Washington or Oregon, let's say, or New York or whatever. So when I was speaking more about multifamily. And so I'm not exactly sure what I was talking about when I was talking to Robert, but I do think each one is operating a little bit differently. So let me explain why I think the office building market is in trouble. Because I think Robert was talking about converting office buildings to residential, I think, as I'm trying to go off of memory exactly. So I love the question. The pandemic and work from home changed office building behavior forever. So people decided, a lot of them, that, hey, I don't want to go to work, and they're working for employers that don't allow them to go to work or have to go to work or whatever it is. Work from home is a thing now. Okay. That put massive pressure on the office landlord, period. And there's a lag effect because if I have when the pandemic hit, I had a 5-year lease, I'm stuck. I'm stuck for 5 years. If I had a 3-year lease, I'm stuck. If I had 1 year, I'm stuck for 1 year. So there's a lease term that the landlord is stuck with, or the tenant. And now they're resizing. And I know this because I'm in the office building business. So companies are resizing. I met with a friend of mine who had a mortgage company. He had 19 people, so it wasn't a huge company, but 19's decent. And he's at home now, he said, with an assistant and a processor. He's working out of his house. So no office. And so what all of that means is that revenues are down. So that's what that means. That means he's not paying rent. People are starting to downsize. Corporate, if you have a corporate office, you're not going to go to zero, although some have. So that's what I mean. Look at what Twitter. Twitter's a great example. Only because we did a YouTube a podcast with a guy that was doing the leasing in San Francisco, and he said that the office buildings are like 30% vacant. Well, Twitter laid off 80% of its workforce. That also means they don't need office space. So those are the things I'm trying to say. And so there's a lag effect with that. And if you take a look at the real problem for office buildings, as an example, and I don't want to go too far down this office building rabbit hole, but a third of the office buildings in America are maturing, their debt's maturing in 2023. So think about that. Think about that number. It's a lot. So all of those buildings were financed at, say, 3%, and now they're probably 5 or 6, depending on the building. Plus their occupancies are down, plus their expenses are up because they're getting killed on utilities and property taxes. So now, on the other side of that, just to be real quick, when single-family house prices go up and single-family interest rates go up, it forces people into rentals. So now on the rental side, there's a little bit of a lag, but rentals are actually multifamily is actually heading into a very favorable time period. Even though single family in San Francisco is dropping, single family in Oregon's dropping, but where are those people going? So and it's in a lot of areas like in Texas, and a lot of areas in Texas, a lot of areas in Florida, North Carolina, even Tennessee. It's growing on the single family side. So you have to back up from everything and take a look at what's going on in each asset class, if that makes sense. So
yeah, absolutely. And for those of you listening, please hit the like button. It really helps us out. And also let us know what inning you think single family and multifamily are in. We are curious to hear your opinion.
Yes.
All right. From the inner circle, Mitch is asking, can you explain global cash flow and why it keeps coming up right now?
Global cash flow. Not sure what he means.
Okay.
I can tell you what I think you might mean, and that's actually a great reason for you being on this seminar this Thursday. So I've had some conversations around the U.S. dollar and how it's looked at by the rest of the globe. Now, we are the world's consumer, so it's important to understand that. What that means is that we buy stuff from Taiwan, from China, from all over the place, and we pay with U.S. dollars. So those dollars go out. Oil, as a lot of you will see, is traded in U.S. dollars. So there's a lot of things that are traded in U.S. dollars around the world. And that's actually the whole point of this discussion on Thursday is this BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and I think Saudi Arabia, right? Or South Africa, right? So they're upset because what we're doing with our dollar. We're printing the heck out of it. We have this high inflation, and the Fed, in a lot of cases, they're saying that we're weaponizing the dollar. So imagine if I'm paying you in U.S. dollars and you live in India, And then I start printing away. And those dollars that you're holding are worth less because they're being inflated away. So that's the issue. That's one big issue around the U.S. dollar. And, of course, the U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be trying to push you guys into gold and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm trying to do. I don't know whether that's a good idea or not. But I think it's important to understand that moving forward, what should you be holding is probably the bigger question. So, and in my conversation with Robert, which is, I thought, a really interesting way to say it, he says, I want to own anything that you can't print. And I think that's a really good way to say it. So if that's the case, that would be real estate, gold, oil, those kinds of things, water, timber. We're going to have Chris Martinson at Limitless. He's going to talk to you a lot about that. So energy-related things that you can't print. So I think that's hopefully answers the question.
Yeah, and so as far as the innings go, Bill is saying he thinks it's in the second or third inning. Still a lot of disbelief here in the suburbs. And then B says first quarter. Claudia's confused to which inning real estate's in. I flip out of Colorado, and my last few listings had multiple offers, appraisal gap, limited inspection, and buyer agent reduced commission. So,
yeah. There's a lot going on, and I think you guys are all trying to solve to where you are locally, and I get that. I understand that. I mean, sometimes I have my blinders on with multifamily. Mm-hmm. I had a really good conversation this morning with a friend that's trying to buy an office building, and I told him to wait, and I had walked them through. So we all get into our lanes, and we all get hyper focused on that. I do understand that, but
absolutely. And Eli said food producing assets as well.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good one. Energy and food, man, they're here to stay. If you can get in those businesses. And I'm talking about grocery stores. Grocery stores, if you think about it, this makes complete sense. With the growth and the population growth, the grocery stores are going to be here. And the distribution of food is something that it's going to be a sure thing for a long time.
Yeah, and John says we don't have many listings here in Boston. Prices are still holding up. And same thing with my brother in Ohio. I mean, they just had a house listed for $405, go for $463 or something. So definitely some parts of the country still rocking and rolling.
I think people are chasing affordability a little bit, but they also have to be careful that they're not going to be able to trade out of something with these higher rates. So if somebody bought, let's say, a $500,000 home 2 years ago or 5 years ago, and they're at 3-4%, they're not going to be at that now.
Right.
So the exact same home they're going to have to downsize to have the same kind of payment. So people are solving there. There's what I call trapped equity everywhere.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sarah said she's seeing consistent price drops in Savannah, 1 to 2% every 30 to 60 days. That's kind of what we're seeing in Phoenix, is just these small little drops here and there, and then a little bit of stagnation.
Yeah, I think you got to go to the seller pain. So what is seller pain? So if we're in the single family, seller pain would be somebody who built a house to sell it. Mm-hmm. That would be at the top of the list for seller pain, because the contractor for sure was over budget. The house cost more, I'm sure, than they thought. The interest rate is on a new build is a floater, so that went up. And then the buyer now has the same issues. They have the the builder's going to want to make a little bit of money on that house, of course, and the buyer is going to be faced with the high interest rate. So that's why you're starting to see on the sale of new construction, even other, is the buy down of the rate. Yeah. Now be careful with that, because I understand that it's only like a year, so they're buying down the rate a year just to get you in. So that's the top of the seller pain. The second one would be second and third homes or AirBNBs that don't make financial sense, and where they're not homeowners, so they're vacant. Like I think you were looking at one where there was nobody in it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they bought it as an investment or something, who knows what, but maybe they renovated it and there's nobody in it and they have hard money on it perhaps. And so you got to look for seller pain. Those are the deals that you're seeing now.
Yeah, absolutely. Robert said he's out of Portland and properties in the city are going down. Properties in the rural areas are going up.
Good.
So
yeah. And that's normal, actually. That's what's happening. And people probably, by the way, I've spent a lot of time in Portland, man. Back in the day, that place is so pretty. They've let it go a little bit, I would say. But the suburbs are beautiful. We just watched that movie Air over the weekend.
Yeah. That was a great
awesome,
movie.
by the way. Highly recommend that movie. All about Phil Knight and Nike out of Beaverton, Oregon, just outside of a suburb of Portland. But there's a lot of really, really Lake Oswego, and there's some really beautiful areas all around Portland that people work and live there. They're going to probably move out of the city. It's happening everywhere.
Yep.
You don't have people aren't just moving across the state lines but they are moving out of the city cores.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question from the inner circle comes from Mustafa, and they're asking, they live in Chandler and they have a warehouse property that has a lot of equity in it, and it's in a prime location. Getting calls every day if I'd be interested in selling.
Nice.
My question is, how do I create a perfect scenario for me to get the most out of that property? Like if I want to keep the property and lease to another company and refinance and get some money out, or do I wait for that I don't want to sell number and see if anyone wants to pay it to do a 1031 exchange? What would Ken do? He's at 5.5% rate right now.
Okay. First of all, congratulations. For those of you guys may or may not know, this will make sense after I say it. I don't know what kind of warehouse space it is, but here's what's going on with warehouse if you think about it. Everybody listening right now wants whatever they order from Amazon in an hour or 2 hours. Okay. So there's only one way to do that. I don't know if you guys remember the old days where you would go, let's go down to the mall and drive down there and walk and go through all the stores and all that kind of stuff. And maybe they had it, maybe they didn't, but they could order it and all that stuff. Nobody wants that anymore. So every once in a while you find somebody who's patient, and so mostly it's a novelty just to get out of the house. But I don't know about you guys, but how many packages do we get to the house in the last 3 days?
Probably 15.
I would say 15 for her, at least. Okay, so here's the point. There's only one way to have that happen, because wherever those warehouses existed before, they now have to be near you. It's called last mile distribution. So you have all this stuff going on. I think that the warehouse space really is probably the darling of the real estate class, hands down. And there's a lot under construction. The vacancy's been really low for a long, long period of time. So with that being said, that's why you have so many people trying to buy it. So don't get disillusioned, or is that right? Disillusioned?
Yeah.
On that. If I were you, I would hold. I would hold if it's cash flowing. The problem you're going to have is that is deploying that money. You're going to have a big capital gain, and you're going to have a problem trying to figure out what to buy next. If I were you, I would look for another industrial property that was perhaps bigger. I would put that under contract and make sure that you like it, you have due diligence, if this is something you really want to do. And then you could do a 1031 into that. But the last thing you want to do is go into contract and then scramble to try to figure out a way to save tax. So you're going to want to have all that those properties in order first before you go and put something in escrow.
But even then, you're at a 5.5% rate, which you're not going to get back.
It's not bad. The 5.5 is not bad. You're hedging. I guess the Fed's coming out next week or this week? Yeah, they're so mark my words, quarter to a half. So I think it's probably a quarter. But again, rates are going up again. So I would hold on to it, man, especially if it's cash flowing. And this is why people send me letters on my properties every single week. I get at least one unsolicited offer a week, maybe two. So that's normal.
Right. Absolutely. Eric wants to know from the inner circle, why do you like first floor units better than second or third floor units? Doesn't the first floor have the noise from upstairs and no vaulted ceilings?
Well, it depends on where it is. So, seniors don't like stairs. So we talked about that earlier. So if it's a senior community, I definitely like that. If you're in a community that, I know from personal experience, like Danille would not probably want a first floor unit. It's a little safer on maybe a second or third floor unit. There's safety issues.
Yeah, but I have a dog, so I would want a first floor unit.
Yeah, there you go. There's another good point for if you have a pet. Although I remember you had that third floor unit, you just have to walk up and down the stairs all the time.
Yeah, and my dog did too.
So you're right. From a noise standpoint, the potential is to have nobody above you is certainly nice. But there are other things. If you're not young and sprite, running up and down the stairs with all your groceries and all the stuff and hauling furniture and all those kinds of things, sometimes people like first floors better.
Well, I'll put it this way. I've had about 30 inquiries to make sure my unit was first floors when they are posted. And I've only had one person asking if it was a top unit.
Okay.
So basically, I think it can be important to people, like my mom has trouble with stairs. A lot of elderly people have trouble with stairs. I mean, there are people that have animals, don't want to have to go up and down the stairs. So, there's a lot of advantages, to first floor units.
When I was a young man, I liked upstairs. I liked the views.
Right. A lot of young people like second floor, don't mind the second floor units, but
my son,
just have a bigger.
My son, Cade, he had a third floor unit. He loved it. A really nice view of the river up in outside of Post Falls, Idaho.
Yep.
He was going to school up there, and it was nice. He loved it. And, once he moved in, it was all, he doesn't care. He's 20 years old, hauling stuff up and down the stairs.
All right, exactly. It doesn't bother him.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused by this question, but I do want to bring it to your attention. So it's from Byron on YouTube. And they're looking at a 20-unit condo property that the owner pays the HOA out of his own pocket. Can he make the offer contingent on the rents being raised to accommodate the HOA? I don't think you could make offers contingent on rents.
So typically, the HOA doesn't have anything to do with rent.
Right.
Typically. So if it does, then I would be careful.
Well, you would really have to, because the owner currently pays the HOA, so he would basically have to start an HOA board and have an HOA fines, right?
So there either is an HOA or there isn't an HOA.
Well, it says here that the owner pays the HOA out of his own pocket.
Okay, so then that would mean that there is an HOA.
Yeah.
So what the owner's doing is there probably is an HOA set up, and the owner's paying the monthly fee on each of the 20 would be my guess. So maybe call it $300 a unit per month, right? So $6,000 a month, probably paying into the HOA. I would dig into the HOA itself and find out, the finances and all those kinds of things are important. But I don't think they have anything to do with rents. But again, we talked about this at the beginning. You want to make sure if you're planning on renting all of those that it's an HOA and the HOA board doesn't want rentals. It could be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's thinking about buying all 20 units, so he would be the owner. So I don't know how.
Oh, so there's. I'm not clear if there's only 20 units in the whole property.
Yeah, there's only 20 units in the whole property.
Then you actually probably don't need an HOA. Disband it. Defund the HOA. Right. There doesn't have to be an HOA if you own them all. I've converted properties from condo to apartments, from apartments to condo. I've done both ways. All an HOA does is protect. If there's 20 different owners, they all pay in. And they all own and are supposed to fund a share of the place getting painted, the roof being redone, the parking lot, the landscaping, That's what an HOA is for. Pay the common area water. But if it's just you, you don't actually need one.
Yeah, because you're just going to be paying
Yeah.
all of that anyways.
Yeah, there's no point of an HOA. It's just an extra step. If you're the owner, that's going to all fall on you anyway.
Okay. Claudia is looking to buy a hotel. Anything she should be asking? Hotels are a different animal.
They are. Well, so I've looked at a bunch of these. I own one, and it's a complicated topic. There's all kinds of different hotels, as you can imagine. There's little boutique ones. There's micro hotels. There's ones for travelers. There's big resorty hotels that are huge. They have conference rooms and conference centers and audiovisual and big staffs, and some with restaurants, some without restaurants. The biggest issue by far is going to be the, where's it located and how occupied is it? Because you're going to have people. Keep in mind, a hotel is nightly. So somebody can come and rent for one night. And depending on what it is, if it's $89 a night or $289 a night, it has to support a staff. So, you got let's say a $40,000 person sitting in there or helping you run it. $89 a night is going to be harder than $289.
Yeah.
So, there's, you have some fixed costs, some fixed expenses to run something. And then you have the revenue is going to offset it somehow.
Yep. So this is an interesting question from Jay from YouTube, and I think it's something everyone wants to know. But he's asking, if stocks or banks tank and the Fed cuts rates in 6 to 12 months, will real estate react positively immediately?
Wow, that's a lot there. So if stocks, which are different from banks, tank,
and the Fed cuts rates.
Okay. So if banks tank, it won't affect assets because those assets typically get taken over by other banks, right? So now it might affect your savings, but as you guys know, the mortgages and things like that get sold all the time. And so if you're a good payer of your mortgage, that's an asset for the next bank. So the stock market, when it doesn't do well, typically bodes well for real estate, generally, because people are making whatever they're making, and it's being hosted or in a location that's hopefully producing for some other people, right? But if it starts to tank, people look for different kinds of assets. What was the third part of the question?
And then will it bounce back right away if the Fed cuts rates?
No, there's lag to everything. So you gotta, I think I did a video on this to try to understand, when the Fed increases rates, how long does it take to trickle through an economy? And it could take a year to 2 years. So, what will happen is if Feds lower their rates, then the people will start to consume quicker again, because lower rates, people finance stuff. As they're going up, they pull back, and that's what the Fed wants. So lower rates could produce inflation.
Well, the interesting thing is that, the Fed's not going to start lowering rates until there's pain. And there's not really been pain yet. There's starting to be pain with these banks going under and things, but there hasn't really been real pain. So when there is real pain, there won't be as many buyers when the Fed does lower rates, whenever that is.
Yeah, and you guys need to know that housing represents over 40% of the CPI. So the Fed is concerned about the CPI, or rate of inflation, consumer price index. So they're going to continue to raise rates, I believe, until we start to see these inflation rates come down, because inflation affects everyone. So that's what I think you should expect. After that, what they won't do is raise rates. They'll probably keep them there for a while. So, they're not going to go from raising them to lowering them. They're going to go to raising them less, to flat, and then maybe at some point they'll look at lowering them. But there's an unwinding that has to take place.
Plus they've raised rates faster than ever before in history. So when they lower them, they might lower them 0.25% a year or 0.5% a year. It's not going to be like every month they're going down, 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 down.
Yeah, what do they meet 7 times a year, I think?
Yeah.
So something like that. So this is going to go into next year, guys, for sure. I think you'd be very surprised to see lowered rates this year at all.
Yep.
The Fed needs to see things uncouple. It needs to see inflation go down. And then once inflation starts to go down, then I think they're just going to hold and then at that point, perhaps. But if they do, remember, what happens when rates go down? What's going to go up? House prices again.
Right.
Right. So that's the whole point. Right now, we're just deflating the bubble that they already created from low rates.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for tuning in today. Make sure you check us out next Monday, 11 o'clock. We're here every week. And make sure you check out Ken's webinar this Thursday at 4 p.m. Arizona time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Please pay attention to what's in the left hand of the screen, not at the bottom. And it's going to have George Gammon, Robert Kiyosaki, Taro Yarber, and Ken all live discussing the economic situation. And it's free. So make sure you, Jerry, put in the show notes the link and make sure you check it out.
Okay, guys. We'll see you soon.
Did you guys put it in the link again? Thank you. All right. See you guys soon.